Hello, this is Edna White. I am so glad you're with me today. Today, we're going to talk about the subject of trauma and body mind connection. We're going to talk about when trauma gets stuck in the body. I've written a book several years ago with the help of an amazing person, Eugene Anderson. And he was one of my favorite preachers back in those times. And he made an indelible mark in my life. And he walked up to me one day and he says, Edna, you're going to be the keeper of the books. You're going to write books. You're going to, create tapes. Back then it was tapes. And I didn't know. I had no idea. So right now, I wrote the book, The Keys to the Kingdom, with some notes and some things that are from him. And I wanted to give back to the world. And this book shares how trauma gets stuck in the body. It shares each part of our body is connected to a mind, to a part in our mind. And each part of our body is reflective of the fruits of the Spirit. When we're not displaying the fruits of the Spirit, and I know you guys are going to ask about that, but that's a whole nother subject. When we're not displaying the fruits of the Spirit, whether we don't know ourselves, we're living life like somebody else, we're not living in our purpose, we're just not living what God wants us to, things in your body start to happen. So, I'm going to talk to you about trauma that gets stuck in the body. And we all know the book, The Body Keeps Score. We know that book, right? I read it. I agree with it 100%. But we also know that when we read some things and we really, really want to get into it, it takes experiential to really get the understanding, right? People living with residual trauma they're always getting ready for the next attack or the life-altering event. How do I know? I've survived trauma, and very serious traumas. So when someone is preoccupied with a real or imagined threat, that results in fear, rage, disappointment, and it's reflected in the body. When we are in denial that a trauma in our lives has happened, when we not deny it, but we lie and say it didn't happen, we keep that trauma alive in our bodies. I like how my hand's going. We keep that trauma going in our lives and it affects us. Research has shown that trauma survivors suffer more illness, especially the ones who do not admit it, take care of it, be responsible for it, and heal from it. That's when you see that so many survivors, especially those of childhood traumas. I think I want to say that the study says from the Adverse Child Experience Study that 5,000% more likely to use drugs, attempt suicide, and suffer an eating disorder. Muscle tension, disease, and injuries are physical manifestations of this preoccupation of trauma. So what am I saying? Admit the trauma. Stop denying it. Stop talking about it. Get somewhere that you can talk about it because it will impact you in ways that you think that it might be arthritis and think that it might be this and think that it might be that, or I inherited from my family, when it's really trauma sitting and festering in your joints, in your muscles, in your back, in your head, like in forms of headaches frequent headaches, migraines. I always say, when you have a migraine, you're going against the grain. It's my way, but I'm going against the grain. That's why you have so much push and pull. The energy in your body is pushing and pulling. Trauma has a severe impact because it affects and ultimately rewires our brain. When the brain goes into stress or is stuck in stress, because that's where I was, because I was always going over it and over it in my mind, always calling myself this or that, never be good, repeating what someone else has told me, and I never made the physical change, never made the change in my heart, never made the change in my mind, never made the change in my mouth, never made the change. When the brain goes, it's complicated to make changes of that life-altering ripple. Because I said earlier, trauma is residual. Childhood, and you think you got over it, then all of a sudden you act a certain way from childhood. That's why we need to heal. We need to know the connection between the brain. There's a saying, or I've heard people say, you act like an alcoholic without the alcohol. You got some drug head, symptoms, but you're not smoking any drugs. Do you know why? Childhood. Do you know why? Generationally. Even though you don't drink and you said you weren't going to drink like your mother, your father, your cousin, and whatever who it was, guess what? You get it for who you were in the household with. Trauma. Gotta work on it. In the animal world, listen to this. When animals go through trauma, watch National Geographic and the Animal Channel. Watch it. When I saw a snake getting this bullfrog, grabbing him. And the bullfrog literally, after he got untangled and slipped on through, the snake didn't get him. Literally, he shaked himself off and he wiped himself down. So what does that tell you? What are we saying, Edna? If an animal discharges the energy of a traumatic event and he shakes it off, this is a signal for us that we need to shake off the freeze response caused by life threats. Now, we know we hear people say, shake it off, shake it off, shake it off. We hear that. But I'm going to tell you what we've turned around. When we go through an experience and we start shaking like a leaf or trembling, now that comes from the limbic brain. Okay, that's a part of the brain that holds the emotions. That sends a signal that the danger has passed. So our shaking, like the animal kingdom, is that the danger has passed. And that the fight or flight system can turn it off. We have turned it around in our brain or been told that shaking and scared is that there's something else going to happen. But that when we're trembling, this has happened already. It's time to turn it off and breathe. Because the animal breathes, takes a big breath. We inadvertently, we breathe short breaths and lean into the fight or the flight shakes. This is our nervous system's response to release the trauma that we experience in our life. So that tells you something. Now, Animals often die if they're unable to shake off the trauma. But humans, it may evolve to mental or physical illnesses. Humans also shake off trauma, but for some, the shake off response isn't available, or they don't acknowledge it, or there's other things that are going on that it's held in the body. I remember when I was in a very serious car accident, and after I remembered it, and I think it was like 4 days after I remembered why I was in the hospital, and it came back to my remembrance. After I remembered it, I started shaking. And in my mind, I was saying, well, I hope I can drive again. All these things. I hope I can drive again. Am I going to feel nervous in that area? And what I did, listen to this. We were driving one day, and I hadn't driven in a while because I had so many injuries. And so my pastor at the time, he says to me, "Why don't you drive the van?" Now, I'm like, "Drive the van?" He's like, "Yeah, you drive." So he had me drive, and I incidentally had to pass where I had the car accident, and I didn't feel scared, and it was like everything lifted. That was my shake response to get it off. And that was available to me. Either it's instituted or the availability is somebody else helps you, or you help yourself. Either way, healing has to start. The problem comes when something prevents the nervous system from completing its natural survival-based response. Then the healing does not happen, and then the experience becomes, and it gets stored in the body. It results in physical and mental illness, sometimes both. But you experience something before over that. Post-traumatic stress disorder. The issues get lodged in our tissues and our brains as well. We have to get to a place that we want to be able to heal. We have to want to resolve our trauma. Yes, we may experience some things in that trauma in a variety of ways. Maybe it's nightmares, it's distress dreams. But if you are healing, those things are going to come. I know for me, flashbacks were my thing. I would be just driving, flashbacks would happen, and they reoccur because the trauma was real and it stayed in your body and was active, and your mind is like a movie, a replay. When a person's reminded of a traumatic event, they can experience emotional and physical upset. But it's up to us to bring that survival into healing and start to acknowledge, to be truthful. I know that we're afraid, and I know that it's kind of scary to sit with yourself in that stuff and look in the mirror at that stuff. But you have to start resolving it, because unresolved trauma can sit in your body and wreak havoc with your body. I hope I've said something to help you. I hope you look into getting the book, The Keys to the Kingdom, and the book, The Body Keeps Score, so that you learn some more about overcoming trauma. I know I have through yoga, meditation, and continuously learning other things to help me holistically heal. This book, The Keys to the Kingdom, will help you holistically heal. Begin to heal. And I hope that everything is going wonderful, and thank you for being here today with me. If you have comments, questions, or anything that you'd like to say to me, please post it in the bottom of this video. And also, if you need me to be your coach or presenter, I'm available to you. Have a wonderful day.